All right. Hello, everyone. We're just gonna give everybody a few minutes to join before we dive in here. It's probably I feel like online meeting culture is such a weird thing these days because when you have back-to-back meetings, there's no time in between them. It's like when you used to have to walk down the hallway to get to a different meeting room, it was like okay to leave a few minutes early, and now it feels weird to like take a break in between meetings. Uh, yeah, it's I don't know why. I don't know how we got into that position, but we did. Um, so today we're gonna walk through several things. The first part of today is going to be a little bit of a recap of Esri UC and AI things. Do a few demos, talk about some recent things in the news about AI, and then I've got some questions and a few other odds and ends that we might go through, and we'll see, just kind of see where it takes us. So if you've got questions along the way, uh, please drop those in the chat, and I'll try to keep an eye on them as we go here. Let's see here. Let me get this set up. Get the screen share going. Okay, so there should be my desktop. There we go. Get the participants can see my screen. Great. Okay, so this is the Whisper Frame live viewer. You can also see it behind me here. The We were just chatting about AI generated music, which I think AI generated music is like it's getting creepy good. I have a friend who has been experimenting with it for about a year using different AI tools to generate music. And I think that, a year ago it would be is kind of in the state where if you ran it enough times, you could get something that was passable. Um, but today you can you can run it a few times and you can get something that's actually pretty good. And in some cases, you can almost not tell. So Spotify had a thing recently where I think they used some AI to write some additional songs for an artist that had passed away. And I think that's super creepy. I don't think they should have done that. Um, Definitely, you should not do that, and not label it that you're doing that. Like, if you're going to use AI to generate music, you should definitely label that, especially if you're trying to mimic an existing artist. Um, so anyway, so we were talking about that, and that's why the Whisper Frame was drawing music. So I think we'll dive in here. So, what we're going to start with is kind of recapping some of the Esri UC and AI at it from a few weeks ago. So this is the headline image from my newsletter at the end of the UC, which this is an AI generated image of the Esri User Conference. And if you've ever been to the Esri User Conference, you will recognize this building. It is the convention center in San Diego. There are actually like banners on it. They don't say welcome to the Esri User Conference. Maybe they did in the past. I don't know. But the, except for like this logo is a little bit weird, and this sign over here, which I think should be like an exit sign or something, is a little weird. But like it's actually like pretty good. It's kind of weird how good this looks as like a fake photograph. Um, but anyway, so at the Esri UC, they announced a whole bunch of AI things. And some of these are existing things that are just kind of continuing to advance, and some of them are new things that are kind of actively coming out in development. So they announced some new AI assistants. So a little bit before the UC, we got the arcade generator in ArcGIS Online. And I'll we're actually going to talk through that a little bit today and see what it can do. So we'll look at that in a little bit. But there's also some kind of interesting versions of those agents. And my favorite one is the Model Builder Next Tool Predictor. And so in ArcGIS Pro, when you're building a model, you can right click and it will and go to suggestions or something like that. And it shows you, oh, based on your existing model and the data, it looks like you're doing this, and here's what might be the next tool. And it gives you several different options, and you can pick the tool and it pulls it in and tries to populate it for you, which if that works well, that could actually be a really useful tool. So I think that's kind of cool to see. And we're starting to see just more AI kind of embedded into the different products within Esri. And so I think it'll be interesting to see kind of how those assistants develop over time. The next thing that we're seeing more of is Geo AI, and specifically for imagery. And what I mean by this is doing something like image extraction, extracting artifacts out of an image, or identifying things in an image. The demo that Esri always does is they use some aerial imagery from a drone over like an oil and gas refinery, and they try to extract the tanks because they're big round white or dark circles, and that they're very obvious, right? They're easy to extract. And so those kinds of things, we're seeing more and more of that. And what I think is interesting about this is that Esri is continuing to refine what it calls deep learning packages, which are these pre-trained models that do a very specific task, like footprint extraction or land cover classification, car detection, solar panels. They're continuing to build and refine these models that you can download and use essentially for free on your own computer in ArcGIS Pro. You just have to have a machine powerful enough to run it efficiently. But the most interesting one to me is the segment anything model. And the reason is that that's a hybrid model between image detection and a large language model. So you can describe to it what you want to extract. And that's usually the one that they're using when they're trying to extract the oil tanks from the refinery imagery. They're using a segment anything model where they're describing what they want and pulling it out. And so I think it's really interesting because these are continuing to get built and refined and delivered in the Living Atlas. You can just download them. You download the deep learning tools from Esri and install them in Pro, and then you can download any one of these and essentially run it. And so that's fairly powerful stuff. The other thing that we're seeing a little bit more of is using AI in field work. And so Survey 123 for a little while has had this idea that you could take a picture, right? You could take a picture of a sign and attach it to the survey. Well, then sometime maybe last year, I think, they added the ability to run a model locally on your device. So things like the iPhones and the Android devices these days, they all have special chips on them that can run neural networks. They can run these AI tools, these deep learning tools. And so you can run them fairly sophisticated models on small devices. And so Survey 123 started integrating that. So you could take a picture of a street sign and it would classify it as like what type of street sign and what damage might have it and fill out the attributes of your survey based on the picture, which is really quite powerful. And you can actually train your own versions of those. So you can start with an image classification model and you can fine tune it to do your specific task that might be park benches or street signs or wheelchair ramp detection or whatever it is that you wanted to do, you could build that so that it happens live in the Survey123 app on the phone, which is also pretty cool. And so we're starting to see more and more of those kind of pre-built models come out and really shortening this label train detect loop. For a long time, there's been ways to do this, but we're seeing as these models are more powerful, we're seeing a shortening of that time because you don't need as much data to fine tune the model. The model has a lot of data, a lot of intelligence baked into it already. Esri also announced some AI coding assistance for Python. So that'll be kind of interesting to see, especially with the ArcGIS SDK for Python, because that SDK is quite extensive. It's very large, it's very deep, it's actually pretty complex. Even the documentation is pretty hard to read as a human. So it'll be interesting to see how good those coding assistants are at writing code that runs the first time. Versus kind of the large language models now, which really struggle with it if you don't throw a lot of documentation into it. So it probably will depend highly on how good the RAG, the retrieval augmented generation is, and how good the fine tuning of the models is if they end up doing that. One thing that I think is worth noting is that all the AI tools in ArcGIS are opt-in, which is actually a little bit different. Like a lot of platforms are pushing AI tools, like for example, Slack is pushing AI tools and they're just like pushing it into Slack. It just appears. And ArcGIS is taking a different approach. You have to actually opt into it as the administrator for your org. You have to turn that on in settings. So if you want to play with these and they're not there, it's probably because you haven't opted into them. So you can go and turn that on in your an administrator can go and turn that on for ArcGIS. Um, yeah, okay. So I don't know. That's a pretty good overview of I think what Esri announced. I want to kind of dive in and just do a couple of tests and see how some of this stuff works. So one of the things is the Survey123 assistant. And this assistant is designed to build a survey for you. And this has been out for a little while, and I learned that it hasn't gotten a lot of use. I want to say that one, Survey123 is an incredibly useful tool in the ArcGIS platform for collecting data. It doesn't even have to be spatial data. Um, and and you have a license for it. If you're using the platform, you have the license already. You don't have to go to something like Typeform or one of those other tools. You can just pull this in. All your data is already in ArcGIS with all your other data, and you can download it as CSVs and process it and do whatever you need to do. Um, and so this is like any of those other data collection tools. Esri's building a thing that lets you build this form quickly and build these forms quickly. And so this actually works pretty well. But I have a trick for making it work even better. And so my trick is to go to a particular large language model. It can be ChatGPT. In this case, I'm going to use Claude because I like to go back and forth between them and see how they compare. But what I'll do normally is I will talk with Claude about the survey that I want to create. Let it help me fill in the gaps in what attributes I might want to use or what I'm going to do, and then ask it to generate instructions for me to give to the Survey123 assistant to generate the form. And so I did this recently with a hackathon that we have coming up next week. Next week at Dymaptic, we're doing an AI-powered hackathon where everybody's going to spend the day building a tool or building a solution using AI in some way. And so I was trying to collect like start times and end times from different people so that I could create teams that kind of match by time zone because we're a very distributed company, and so I don't want to I want to try to match people up by existing AI skills, but also by time zone so that somebody doesn't have to get up really early to do it outside their normal workout anyway. So if I come in here and I say something like I am hosting a hackathon and I need to collect information about when people can start. They should spend 8 hours with their working with their team and with their team and uh, yeah, and we need to collect those start and end times. Can you design the questions for a survey 123? Um, can you design the questions for a survey 123 that can collect this information? And so something along those lines. I think my other prompt actually was way more specific because I had a lot of other information that I was trying to collect. And I find that this back and forth with Claude is actually it works a little bit better than going back and forth um, with the Survey 123 chatbot. The Survey 123 chatbot tends to overwrite things more quickly. Um, and oh, the other thing I should note is when you're working with this, if you're using it on an existing survey, it can't edit it. It just overwrites the whole thing. So it's kind of one shot. So you kind of got to think through what you want and then just send it off. So let's see kind of what. So it gave it some output here. So we've got team participant name, contact email, scheduling information. This looks pretty good. I don't know. If I was doing this for real, I would definitely throw this. I would definitely work on this a little bit, but I'm just gonna copy it. We're gonna paste it in here, and we're just gonna see what the arcade assistant does with that. I think I suspect it's actually going to do a pretty good job, but we'll give it a second to come back with that. So the advantage is you get to kind of go back and forth and 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 discuss slash get other ideas about what you might collect in that survey. Whereas the survey 123 AI it's designed to build the survey. So it doesn't want to chat with you about what information you might need if you don't know. It just wants to build the survey. So it will jump straight to here are the fields you should use. Whereas I could get Claude to ask me questions about it instead of me telling it what I wanted. And so, okay, so it did it. So it's broken into sections, which is probably useful. Um, additional, yeah, I mean, this looks pretty good. Let's just hit generate and see what it does here. Let's see, we had a chat just one day. I mean, we basically do use AI all day, every day, but we are taking a break from normal work to have an experimentation day, so to speak, to spend some time learning how to use it in new ways and do different things outside of our work for clients, which, it's good to take a break every once in a while and step back from your normal workflow, I think, and be like, okay, what can I use this thing for outside of what I normally do? And then how does that apply? So yeah, it's a little bit like a training exercise, a little bit like a break to have some fun. Probably both of those things. Hopefully it'll be fun. Okay, so that's actually pretty good. So it broke it into sections. We have names. It has dates. So obviously I should have had that removed because it is just kind of one thing. Specify time zone. Yeah, so confirmation constraints. Yeah, so like this actually worked pretty good. This is way more information that I need to actually collect. I just need like when do you start, when do you end, how many times a day do you use AI? Like I just have a few things like that so that I can match up the teams with folks that use AI to do everything versus who are just kind of beginners getting started with it and kind of match those teams by skill and match everything up. Um, so actually, fun side story. In order to build the teams for the hackathon, I wrote an app to do that using an AI tool that I built. So I built an AI tool to help me build an app, and then I used it to build an app to help me build the teams for the hackathon. So there's a little bit of AI inception there. Um, but I can't reveal it yet because the teams are a secret until closer to our hackathon next week. So I can't share it yet, even though it was actually a really cool app and was pretty fun to build. Okay, so anyway, the survey assistant in survey 123, the AI assistant actually does a really great job of building, version 0 of this. Like any AI tool, it definitely falls over sometimes and doesn't do things well. The best trick I have to make it behave the best the first time is doing it with something like Claude or ChatGPT first and talking through what do you want, and then sending that list that has all of the things like select multiple and stuff like that in it, sending it to Survey 123 to have it build it from there. So that's definitely my workflow. And that's actually a really common workflow that I use in general, whether anytime I'm using an AI that's built into a product, I'm often first using an AI like Claude or ChatGPT to refine what I want to do before I send the request off to that specific AI product. And the reason is those specific products often aren't designed to chit chat with me about what I might need or ask me detailed questions to get my thoughts going. Um, and they're often not using the most best frontier models. They're often using the cheaper models and or specialized fine-tuned models that are built very specifically for a use case. So very common workflow that I highly recommend is using them in combination like this to generate the input for the next one. It's actually very much an agentic workflow, and where I'm using AI agents to do work for me. I'm just the glue in the middle at the moment because there's no good agent today that could go and talk with Claude about this and then send it off to the Survey 123 agent. Like that glue doesn't exist today. People are working on it, but it doesn't work very well today. Even ChatGPT's agent mode, which ironically, I've already used up my credits for this month, so I can't demo that. Also, maybe ironically, I've used up the credits and I have yet to have it do anything successful. So that's fun. So agents are not there yet. Okay, so Survey 123, you should definitely use it. It's quite valuable, especially just to get to version 0 very quickly, right? You don't have to sit here and arrange the 18 questions in this forum. You can chat for a few minutes with ChatGPT or Claude, and then you can have it built, and you've got version 0 very, very quickly. All right, on to my one of my favorites, I think. I'm really glad that Esri has finally released an arcade uh, editor, an arcade assistant, I should say. Um, I'm really glad because we built a very simple version of an arcade assistant 2 years ago after the Microsoft Build Conference when Microsoft released all of the OpenAI integrations and stuff. And it wasn't perfect, but it did work. And so I feel like I probably should have turned that into a product um, instead of kind of abandoning it. But that's a hindsight 2020 thing. But Esri has done it now. And so we're going to do a couple of quick experiments with it so we can kind of see what its limitations are. So what I have in my map is I have some data from the city of Portland where I live, their open data hub. I have the parks data set, which has name and acres and a few other odds and ends, but not a lot of information. And so this is Laurelhurst Park sitting here. And then I have street trees. And that's basically every tree planted in the right of way along a street in the city of Portland. Yes, we collect and monitor all of them. I think that's adorable. I love it so much. So if I click on one of these little tiny trees right here, then you can see we actually have quite a bit of information about them. We have their address in addition to their lat long, their condition, the last time they were visited for inventory, how big they were, their type, their size, all kinds of things, all the way down to are there high voltage wires near it or in it, and what species is that tree. But this is pretty boring. It's not a very good, it's not a very good tree pop-up. So what we're going to do is we're going to see if we can use the arcade assistant to simply replace our pop-up. So I'm going to go straight to the arcade assistant. I'm not going to do anything myself. I'm going to make it do all the work. And I'm just going to say, um, I want a nice tree themed pop-up for my tree layer for this layer. Um, use emojis and make it fun, but be sure all the data is present. That's all I'm going to do. Okay, so while that runs for a second, there's a couple of well, that's sad. I want you to make a nice tree themed HTML pop-up. I feel slightly annoyed. Oh, come on. I did this yesterday and it worked fine. Okay. Uh, make an HTML, make some HTML that has all of the fields for this layer that is tree themed and uses emojis. I This is incredibly disappointing right now. Um, this worked. Maybe I didn't do this yesterday. This did work. Um, what I was gonna explain while I think about how another way to write this, if you have a way or you think I should try writing this, put it in the chat for me. Um, what I was gonna explain is there are these two things here you can click on, and you can see what context the assistant is using, and it's using the pop-up, arcade pop-up context, and over here it's telling you what layer it has access to, which is our street tree inventory. Um, uh, write an arcade expression for a pop-up that for this layer. Thanks, Ian, for being an external brain. See if it does anything. Oh, it did something. Okay. Whew. Thank you. All right. So, add to editor, or let's see here. Replace all code in editor. There we go. Okay, so let's see what it did. It generated, yeah, it did it. This isn't actually, it's very lame. It's very lame. Let's see. I'll show you. That's what it did. Um, get rid of our field list here. So when I did this the other day, it created a whole nice layout with emojis and colors and backgrounds and statements about it converted good and bad into emojis, and it did all kinds of interesting things. Kind of like my whisper frame is doing back here. I'm going to try it one more time. And now I'm nervous that my other test isn't going to work. But now I've locked up the whole thing. Huh. Oh, I have broken it. Okay, let's just refresh the whole thing. Nothing like a good demo. I planned for it to go like this. I really did. I promise. Um, not exactly. I mean, now the layers are being slow. My goodness. Well, we may have to abandon this demo. The other, so I'm really disappointed because it previously did a pretty good job of taking free reign and generating that HTML, which I thought was a really great way to build way more of immersive pop-ups. Because it will render HTML for you. So you can build nice borders and backgrounds and do all kinds of things to build that HTML string and make really nice looking pop-ups from the HTML, not just the list of attributes. And it's a really great way to enhance something like Experience Builder or dashboards or whatever, wherever you're putting that map. It's a really great way to enhance it. But I guess we're back to doing it by hand, which is sad. Um, the other thing that I was going to show, which my layers are now not loading. Hopefully it's not my internet connection. Somebody would probably ping me on a different device if it was really bad. So the other thing that I was going to load was, or that I was going to demo is clicking on a park. And in the pop-up, I was going to have it buffer the park by 50 feet and then count the number of trees that are inside that buffer. And that's actually fairly straightforward in Arcade. It doesn't take very much work to do that. But I don't ever remember what all the functions are in Arcade because it is yet another programming language. And so I don't ever remember what those functions are. And the Arcade Assistant actually does a really great job of writing that. The thing that it gets confused about is if you remember, I can't show you. If you remember, we were looking at those two things about its context, saying that it had pop-up context and then it had this layer as context. The Arcade Assistant can only have today in pop-up mode. I don't know about the other modes at the moment, but in pop-up mode today, it can only have one layer as context. So even though Arcade can reach across multiple layers and operate on them or query them or pull them together or do things, the Arcade Assistant doesn't understand. So what it does when you go into parks and you say, buffer this feature by 50 feet and select and count the number of trees that are in that buffer, it'll write that code and it'll reach across and get the trees layer, but it'll just put the word trees in it because it doesn't know what the name of the layer is. You can get around that by just going to the layer and renaming it or editing the Arcade with the actual name of the layer, and then everything works fine. But it doesn't understand that there are other layers there yet, which is kind of an unfortunate shortcoming. I think it's actually pretty important that Arcade Assistant can handle multiple layers. I would actually, personally, I would prefer that the Arcade Assistant gave me code that was slightly sketchy, but can understand the full context of the capabilities versus give me really good code, but be severely limited in what its context is. So anyway, it's kind of loading parks and stuff very slowly, but I'm just going to skip this and we'll go on to some other stuff. So the other thing that's been in the news recently, and this was announced last week, is Google released a thing called AlphaEarth. And I think that next week's newsletter is going to be kind of a deeper dive into this. It might get delayed a little bit because I'm trying to actually get access to AlphaEarth to use myself. So we'll see. But basically what they did is they created a new type of embedding that tries to work with spatial data. And they released a PDF about it. And this is a very scientific-esque paper about their process, which I've read all of once and most of more than once as I'm trying to understand it. But one of the best things about LLMs these days is that they can explain stuff like this for you. So just right before I got on to do this live stream, I dropped this PDF into Claude and I asked it to give me a summary of how they did this and kind of what it is. And so its summary of what it is the first general purpose embedding model that can consistently outperform domain-specific approaches across Earth observation mapping applications. Okay, that's a lot of fluff, but this could be incredibly powerful. And so I guess first we should define embedding a little bit. Um, Embedding is the idea of representing a concept with numbers. The best example is an address is a string of text that you can represent with a lat long. And that is essentially what an embedding is. The embedding is the numeric representation of that thing. And so for location, we go from address to lat long. That lat long is the numeric representation of the text address. We can do that in a much more sophisticated way with more complex concepts. And so inside an LLM or inside AI, one of the things that we often do is we embed text. And what I mean when I say that is we convert a block of text into a set of numbers. And those numbers represent the meaning of that text. And just like our address and our lat long, if the numbers are close together in that, if our two lat longs are close together, that means they are more related, right? In theory. But for text, that is also true. So those embeddings for text, the closer they are, the more related they are. And so what that enables you to do is very powerful search, because you're not just searching for keywords in text. Instead, you're searching for meaning. And so when a user asks a question of an LLM, especially in GPT, one of the things that happens is that question is embedded, right? We get the numeric representation of that question. And then it searches its internal knowledge base, which is in ChatGPT is all of the chats you've previously had. Excuse me, all of the chats you've previously had with ChatGPT. It searches that knowledge base of information and pulls relevant pieces in so that the AI has access to it. And it's doing that by meaning, not by keyword search, which is what makes it so very powerful. And so AlphaEarth has created an embedding model for location information. Specifically, they've done it for imagery, I believe. And I think what this is going to empower is things like searching for either locations on the Earth that are similar, or being able to embed new imagery and searching for similar locations or similar features, or very quickly searching existing imagery for a new feature. So this is embedding. So remember that it's the representation of the information. So it's the representation of an image in numbers. It is not the actual image. So the computer might tell you that, oh, there are tanks in this hexagon, for example, on the Earth, because it looked at the image that hexagon was, and its embedding was similar to the text embedding of looking for tanks. And sorry, I just thought of, there's a YouTube video that explains this really well that I'm going to try to find. Embedding in general. So what that means is for us in AlphaEarth is that I think you'd be able to search for tanks, for example, and find imagery out of your repository of imagery that had tanks in it. It's not going to give you the polygon around each one, right? That's a separate process that you would run. But you'd be able to go from searching the entire Earth of imagery to searching just these spots, because all of those spots have tanks in them, and extracting out of those, which is often what embedding is used for in text. You're using it to reduce the search space down. So for example, I have embeddings for the entire Esri JavaScript documentation. And what that allows me to do is very quickly search for concepts and find concepts in that documentation. But what I do then is I take all of those pieces, the entire documents, and I put them into the LLM for it to answer my question by reading by reading that the entire document, not just a little snippet that might have matched it. So in the case of Earth imagery, we're looking at not just the hexagon that matched, but maybe the hexagons around it too, the immediate surrounding area. So I feel like that was a really amorphous, weird description of this. So I'm going to work on focusing that and making it better. But this could be really fascinating because we haven't really seen location embedding models yet. So this could be very interesting. This could really change the way we do like contextual geographic search with which we can't do in a large language model today, right? We can just search like vector data or attributes of vector data, but the location itself isn't attached to that embedding. So this could really change that game, but we will see. So that's something that I'm working on, is trying to better understand what this means and how we can leverage it in GIS as a day-to-day thing. Okay. So I'm gonna put the Whisper frame up here. There's our trees. Geospatial data analysis, new Earth observation. Yeah, I think it even spelled that right. Observation technology. So there's the Whisper frame keeping up for us. Okay, let's go to some questions we had. Okay, so the first question here is much of what AI will do in these early stages and maybe ongoing for the probably short future going to be throwaway? Going to be throwaway is an interesting term. I'm not sure that throwaway is exactly it, but kind of. And I think the important thing is that where we are right now with AI is the very beginning. The models that we have today are the simplest models that we will ever have, right? They're only going to get more complex and more capable from here. The speed at which they get more capable is yet to be determined. It could go very quickly. We could have models that can replace a human software developer next year, or it could be 10 years from now. And I don't know which one of those it is. Probably 10 years is unlikely. But probably next year is also unlikely. So it's probably in between. But these models are getting better every time that we get new ones. And so, and all of the big frontier models, they leapfrog each other over time. So I don't know that it's going to be throwaway. The models themselves probably are. Like nobody uses GPT-3 anymore, right? And it's only a few years old. So the models themselves probably are throwaway, but I think what we're going to get to very soon is models that can build new models, or at least help aid in the research of new models. And so, GPT-5 might help build GPT-6. And I think that's getting close to like self-improvement territory where the models is improving itself, even if it is over larger spans of time. We're getting closer to that. Yeah, that's going to happen. I think it's also worth noting, today's models do not learn from what you put into them. ChatGPT feels like it learns about you because you can do things like, using all the information you know about me, generate an image of blah, blah, blah. And so it feels like it's learning. It's not learning in the sense that the model has gotten better. It's the same model that it was when you open your GPT account. Well, maybe it's the same model, but it's the same model in general. GPT-03, for example. But what it's done is it remembers all of your previous chats with it. So it knows everything about that. And it uses embedding that we just talked about roughly to bring that forward into the AI's context window. So it doesn't learn in that sense. Like the model is not recursively improving, but it does have memory. But that memory is specific to the chats you've had with it. Like except for things like maybe public chats that might leak or your chats being used as training data in the future. It's not learning directly from your chats today. When it remembers something that you told it yesterday, that's not the model doing that. That's the embedding pulling that memory forward for the model to read again. Okay. Next question. What AI related skills should an aspiring GIS developer make sure to have besides the obvious of Copilot or JetBrains AI, et cetera? Good question. So on the AI front, you need to be able to use all of these tools. Copilot, JetBrains AI, those are the most simple versions of the tools that you could learn. Copilot right now is behind on, especially on agentic code writing. Other tools like Cursor are much better at it. And then we've got my favorite, my favorite is still CodeBuff, which can write entire applications for you very quickly. So knowing how to use those tools, knowing how to use an AI like Claude to distill information or summarize information to help make you more efficient. Knowing when the AI might be wrong, like being able to look at some output and be like, yeah, I don't like this, and question it. Maybe you had it write a blog post for you and you don't like the wording, and so being like, yeah, I'm gonna fix this. Or you ask it a technical question and the answer just doesn't jive with your gut. So I think, one of the things that you learn from experience as a software developer is like what makes sense and what doesn't. And reading a Stack Overflow post, you're like, that doesn't really fit my need. You still have to develop that internal sense, even with AI, because today it still gets things wrong or doesn't understand the broader context. And I'm trying to remember an example. I was working on an app recently where the I asked it to do something and it did what could be correct. And I can't remember the exact specifics of it right now. I'll hope if I think of it, I'll come back to it. But it did. I remember feeling like that could be right, but that's not what I meant. And that's because language is mushy, right? When I describe something to an AI, it's like describing it to a human. It's going to interpret what I mean and fill in the gaps, right? Because I'm not giving it code to run, I'm giving it concepts. So you need to know how to troubleshoot things. You need to be resilient and flexible to new technologies. When a new AI coding tool comes out, you need to go try it and evaluate it. Does it work for you? Does it solve your problems, or does it not? And being able to be flexible and incorporate new tools quickly into your workflow. I think the other thing is continuing to question what AI is doing and question the world around you, and especially in a technical sense, like, does this process that we're doing make sense? We're going to do this statistical analysis. Does it make sense to do it on this data, right? I could use like Copilot in Microsoft Fabric to write some Python to do a statistical analysis, but I still have to look at that output and decide, is it significant or not? And so like continuing to understand those concepts and really get that as part of you, I think is really important. So, whatever STEM type field that looks like, whether it's statistics or computer science or engineering, but like having that mindset, being open to new tools, but also questioning them as you're using them and looking for where it might go wrong and where you have to stick your human hand in. Also, being creative. Like, models have limited creativity right now. And so that is the human. You can ask it to brainstorm 10 LinkedIn post ideas. They're all pretty bland. But sometimes they get your brain going, right? And then you jot down 10 ideas and then you send it back to the AI and you ask it to help refine those. And then that gives you some new ideas and you jot down 10 more and you go back and forth with it as a brainstorming tool. So learning how to use these tools in different ways, I think, is that's probably the number one skill, but being flexible. I think that's kind of it. Um, Next question. Did you see the news about the AI that deleted the database and what are your thoughts on that? Yes, I did. I wrote a post on it last week. Um, for those that haven't followed that in the news, software developer was writing. Oh yeah, here this one was writing an app using an AI tool, and it ran a command DB push that ended up deleting the database, and specifically deleting the production database. And the person had told it, do not make changes without explicit permission. Okay. I guess this is what I expect an AI to do, though. It does not follow instructions in that way. Just like an overeager intern might accidentally delete the production database, being well-intentioned, if I gave them the credentials to. So I would never give an AI the credentials to production. I would have it work on a copy so that when it did delete this, I could be like, what happened? But then I can just go grab a new copy and restore it to my local computer. I've definitely had CodeBuff run this same command. And the reason that it runs the command is it tries to query the database and it sees that there's nothing there. And the reason it thinks there was nothing there is because the query failed. And the query failed because it didn't have the right connection string, because it couldn't load because it didn't have access to the username and password. Because I don't want the AI to have the username and password. I don't want that credential to leak into the AI. And so it got confused and it ran a command, and that command did work, and it deleted the database. Well, for me, it wasn't that big a deal. I just restored it from a backup and kept going, because I was working in a local environment. So I think we have to expect AI to do things like this, and we have to plan for it. Whether you're using it as a coding tool locally on your computer, not in your production environment, or if you're building an AI tool like a chatbot to answer questions for your customers, you have to assume that it's going to do something wrong. And you have to be prepared for that. You have to plan for that. It could be it deleted your database. It could be it offered a refund to a customer when it wasn't supposed to. Either way, you have to plan for it to go wrong. That's where we are with the current state of AI. You have to plan for things to go wrong. MCP servers. So this is actually a question for all of you. An MCP server is a server that an AI can talk to and do things. So in Claude, I can actually, where is it? I can add connectors. And when I add connectors inside Claude, and ChatGPT can do this too in the app on my computer, I can add it to have access to things like Notion or calendar or email or whatever so that it has access to some of my information. And then I can ask it to take action based on that. It basically gives it functions to call, like add notes about this, or update or draft an email for me about this to this person, create a calendar item about this, etc. So the question for all of you is, if there was an integration like this where I could go click here and I could say add connector, and then I could say ArcGIS Pro, and then I could automate things in ArcGIS Pro by talking to Claude, what would those things be that you want to see? Like, what would you want to be able to talk to Claude about, or ChatGPT, and have it integrate with ArcGIS Pro? What would you want it to do? So yeah, if you got ideas for that, please drop that in the comments, because this is a thing that we're kind of bouncing around at work. This was posed earlier. And it's like, what types of things would be useful for an external integration like that? And it might be something like updating definition queries, or moving layers around, or creating layouts, or I'm not sure. So I'm super curious to see if that resonates with anybody and if you've got any ideas. I've got just a couple minutes left, so I'm going to give a quick update on a thing that I've done since last time. So last time, you remember we talked about oh, I don't have it open anymore, about the Claude experiment that Anthropic did, where it ran a vending machine in the office. And I love this example because um, it failed, but it failed in like amazing ways. And I just really, really like this example. And I think it's a cool measure. I'm not sure if it's particularly useful, but it is a very cool and interesting measure of how close to letting an AI take something over are we. So um, it's been quite hot in Portland recently. And my sprinkler system, the house that I bought last fall, had a sprinkler system, but it wasn't working. It hadn't been used. The previous owner hadn't used it. It was really messed up. So I spent a couple of weekends going around and fixing the sprinkler system and cleaning it up, replacing sprinkler heads, putting new drip endpoints on it, all that kind of stuff. And as I was starting to test it and use it, it had one of those old Rainbird things on it. It's not even that old, I don't think. Um, but it was just really clunky. It has like two buttons and a dial, and you're like spinning it around and you press the button, and sometimes it registers it as two clicks instead of one click, and you're trying to set the time and the duration on all the different zones. It was just terrible. So I started looking for an alternative, and I found this thing called Open Sprinkler, which is an open piece of open source hardware. It's only like 250 bucks. Um, that I can just replace that Rainbird thing with, and then I can open it up on my phone and on a website, and I can schedule my sprinklers. And it has an API. So this weekend, I'm going to be hooking Claude up to my sprinkler system, and I think a weather API, and I'm probably going to give it some pictures. And we're going to leave Claude in charge of my sprinkler system for the next month, and we're going to see what happens. Um, Probably I'm also going to attach it to like our house Discord channel so that it can ask questions. Because one of the things that I thought about is, well, if somebody's in the backyard, like have a fire in the backyard in our fire pit roasting marshmallows, and it's 10 p.m., but Claude doesn't know that, Claude might start up the sprinkler system while people are in the backyard, which might be kind of funny, but is also not my intention. So I'm going to give it the ability to communicate with us and ask us questions and engage us with feedback. And hopefully with that, it'll be able to do things as well, like tell me how this garden bed is doing. What does the soil moisture look like? Because I don't have sensors to give it feedback about what the actual moisture is. So we're just going to do it with pictures and having it ask questions and being able to turn them on and off over time. And we're going to see what this thing does. So it's much simpler, I think, than the running a vending machine, but it's going to be kind of fun. I did the same. I also the same company that makes Open Sprinkler. They make an open garage door opener. So I'm going to have an API for my garage door, which is right here. So I'm gonna do the same thing with it. I'm going to put an AI in charge of my garage door, probably with some safeties so that it can't open it if I'm not physically present. I'll come up with some way to do that, but I'm going to put it in charge of the garage door and have it adjust it for temperature or maybe noise. Like if my neighbor starts mowing their lawn, I want to close the door, and see if I can automate that as well. And maybe I was thinking about trying to hook it into the Whisper frame so that it can hear me, so that I could give it commands like, no, don't run the sprinklers at 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and it would turn them off. We'll see. Baby steps though. We're going to start with small things. Sprinkler system is next. Okay. That wraps us up for this month. So thank you everybody for coming. Next month is September 4th, same time. I don't know what day of the week that is, but September 4th will be the next one of these. Hopefully, I'll have an update on the sprinkler system and some other things that I'm working on as well. Maybe some demos of some new AI powered tools that I'm hoping to release between now and then. So thank you everyone for coming, and we'll see you next time.